Hey everyone. So following our student panel that just ended, I'm so excited to introduce Mandy Branch, who will be discussing financial aid. So Mandy Branch is the University of Georgia's outreach coordinator for financial aid. She is a very seasoned speaker, from giving presentations at high school financial aid nights to staffing tables at college research fairs, and even meeting with students at their schools to help them navigate Fafsa. So let's welcome Mandy as she informs us about financial aid.
Thank you, May. So I will share my screen. So today I'm here to tell you all about financial aid. The goal of this presentation is to let you know how to apply for financial aid for college, what types of financial aid are available, and how to determine college costs. Even though I'm with the University of Georgia, the information in this presentation is not UGA specific. It's applicable wherever you go to college. I will sometimes use UGA as a reference of how something works, but this information is applicable whether or not you're going to UGA or another college. So with that, we will get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is where to search for scholarships. So some websites you can go to search for scholarships are fastweb.com, careeronestop.org, and GA Futures. GA Futures, a lot of students think of it as where they go to apply for HOPE and the Zell Miller Scholarship, but they also have a scholarship search feature. So I encourage students to use all of these different options when applying for scholarships. I also encourage high school seniors to talk to your high school guidance counselor about local scholarships, because with local scholarships, only students within that community can apply for those scholarships. So that helps narrow down the competitiveness. You're just applying for that scholarship and competing against other students in your community instead of across the nation for that scholarship. But the goal is to apply for scholarships. Use these websites and also talk to your high school guidance counselor about scholarship opportunities. So one big way to apply for financial aid is by completing the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. High school seniors, you will complete this application, and then every year you're in college, you'll complete this application in order to apply for federal student aid. With this application, it is a free application, so you should never pay anyone to assist you with this application. You can complete it either on the web, or they now also have a My Student Aid mobile app. So you can download that app to your phone and use that to complete the FAFSA. Either way works. With this application, again, I'm going to stress this quite frequently, it is free. So you should never pay anyone for assistance with the FAFSA. High schools typically have FAFSA nights where you can go to your high school and go to the library or a computer lab or the cafeteria and bring your Chromebook and then sit down with someone such as myself and get assistance in completing the FAFSA. Colleges also offer FAFSA assistance. So for example, I will set up in-person and Zoom appointments with students to help them complete the FAFSA. And this type of service is free. The events at the high schools are free. If you set up an appointment with a college, it's free. You should never pay anyone for assistance with the FAFSA. With this application, it screens you for grants, which are free money, loans, which you have to repay, federal work study, which is a part-time job, and it does also screen you for the HOPE and Zell Miller scholarships as well. With this application, it will ask for income information. So when it's looking at income information, it's looking for the prior year income information. Well, what in the world does that mean? So high school seniors, you will be completing the 22-23 FAFSA. To figure out what the prior year income information is, you take that first year, 2022, subtract 2, that's going to give you 2020, and that's that prior year information. So each year, that's how you figure out what income information it's going to want. It does have to be completed each year you're in college if you want to be screened for federal aid. Every question on the FAFSA has a helpful hints question mark beside it. So if you're not sure how to answer the question, just click on that little question mark and it'll give you some more details about how to answer that question. I did want to let you know about something called professional judgment. So when you complete the FAFSA, you are required to input the information that is requested. So if it asks for the 2020 tax information, you're required to input that information. But let's say your family has had a change in circumstances. So maybe there's been a job loss or a reduction in income or unusual medical expenses. You can follow up with the financial aid office at the college you're going to attend for something called professional judgment, where we will talk with you to find out what your circumstances are. We will then determine if this process might benefit you and your family, and we will gather alternate documentation from you. We will update the numbers on the FAFSA and see if that causes you to qualify for additional federal aid. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But if you do have circumstances that the FAFSA can't capture, such as a reduction in income or loss of income or unusual medical expenses, please follow up with your financial aid office about that professional judgment process. And it's also important to know what the word verification means. The Department of Education selects students' FAFSAs for something called verification, where they require the college to make sure that everything on the FAFSA is correct. If a student is selected for verification, the student is told on their student aid report, that's something you get when you finish the FAFSA, and the college is also informed. When the college is informed that a student has been selected for verification, we cannot determine your eligibility for those grants, those loans, those work study funds until you've completed that process. Sometimes that process is very simple. We just have to confirm that the information on your FAFSA about the number in college and the number in household is correct. Sometimes we actually have to request copies of tax returns and W-2s and compare the information on the FAFSA to what's on the document and make sure it matches up. It varies from student to student, but students, if you get an email from your college about you need to complete verification, please be sure to respond to that in a timely manner and get them the requested documents so that way there's no holdup on us determining how much you qualify for in federal aid. And then it's also important to check with the colleges you're applying to and find out when you need to complete this FAFSA. Do you need to complete it by a certain deadline, or do they have a priority date? And I'll give you an example of a priority date very shortly. With this application, you do have to sign it. You sign it with something called an FSA ID. That's a username and password that you create that is used to log into the FAFSA. It's also used to access something called the Irs Data Retrieval tool. So if you file taxes or your parents file taxes and you want to just pull in that information directly from the IRS instead of having to dig out of your tax return out of your file drawer and type in the numbers yourself, you use the FSA ID to access that tool. And it's also used to sign the FAFSA. So high school seniors, if you haven't set up your FSA ID yet, go ahead and do so because you will need that to sign the FAFSA. And if you're a dependent student, one of your parents has to sign the FAFSA, and the parent signs the FAFSA with the parent's FSA ID. If the parent already has an FSA ID because let's say they're also in college, or because you have a sibling who's already in college and the parent set up an FSA ID so they could sign that sibling's FAFSA, the parent can use their same FSA ID to sign your FAFSA. When should you complete the FAFSA? It becomes available every October 1st. So when you're in college, just keep in mind, once October rolls around, that's when you can complete that FAFSA. And the priority date to complete it for UGA, this is an example of how a process works, is December 15th. Students can complete it after that date, but there are certain funds that are very limited. And if you wait until after that date to complete it, those funds may be exhausted. Other colleges have different dates. Some have similar dates, but check with your college to find out what their priority date is for completion of the FAFSA. With the FAFSA, there are currently 2 FAFSAs available. So if you are a high school senior and you're wondering which one should I complete, be sure to complete the 22-23 FAFSA. That screens students for aid for fall 22, spring 2023, and summer 2023. And if you decide to go to college early, so you graduate from high school in May and then boom, want to immediately go to college in the summer, you will also need to complete the 21-22 FAFSA. But for sure, every high school senior should be completing the 22-23 FAFSA. Here are some FAFSA screenshots and tips. So again, you complete it on the web, and this is what the web looks like. You can either click Start Here or Log In. When you click those options, it's going to say, please choose which one you want to use. You can choose I am a student and want to access the FAFSA form, or if your parents want to start it, they can click out I am a parent. No one should be clicking I am a preparer because that's someone you're paying to complete the FAFSA. If you choose I am a student, it will ask for you to log in with your FSA ID, or you can create one at that time. Or you can log in with your personal identifiers, your name, your social security number, your date of birth, but you will have to eventually create that FSA ID to sign the FAFSA. So I recommend just going ahead and creating the FSA ID. If a parent says, I'm a parent and I'm filling out a FAFSA form for a student, it is the student's application. So the parents will be prompted to input the student's information, the student's name, date of birth, and social security number. When you're completing the FAFSA, it's going to ask you to create a save key. That's something easily remembered. So that way, if you can't finish the FAFSA at that time, when you go to log into it later, if you remember your save key, then boom, it'll take you right where you left off. A save key could be a number combination. It could be a word such as your favorite color, but it's just something easy for you to remember. So that way, if you have to finish it later, you type in your save key and it'll take you right where you left off. When you're completing the FAFSA, at the very top, it'll tell you how you're progressing. So it has 7 sections: student demographics, school selection, dependency status, parent demographics, parent financials, student financials, sign and submit. As you progress, those numbers will change to blue to let you know we're now in this section. And so as you get closer to the sign and submit part, that will be very exciting as those numbers turn to blue to show you you're almost finished. With this application, you do have to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen to apply for federal student aid. So a U.S. citizen or permanent resident typically. If the student is a citizen or eligible non-citizen and has a social security number, but the parents do not, the student can still complete the FAFSA, but when you're inputting your parents' information, because your parents don't have a social security number, you'll have to input zeros for their social. And then instead of being able to sign the FAFSA electronically, you'll have to print out a signature page, have your parents sign it, and then mail that off. So if your parents do not have social security numbers, you can still complete the FAFSA if you have a social security number, but just make sure to input all zeros for your parent's social security number. When it comes to where do you want to send your FAFSA information, you can input that into the college search section of the FAFSA. You do not have to be admitted to or even have applied to a college to go ahead and include them in this section. You can initially submit your FAFSA to up to 10 colleges. If you need to submit it to more than 10, you submit it to the 10 first, let your FAFSA process. Once it's processed, you can log back in and remove schools and add new schools and send it to those new schools. With the FAFSA, it's going to ask students a series of questions to determine if parent information should be included on the FAFSA. And basically, if you say no to all of those dependency status questions, it's going to ask for parent information. But if you say yes to any of these dependency status questions, it's not going to ask for parent information. It's only going to ask for you, the student's information, and it's going to consider you to be independent. And I wanted to point out a couple of those questions. One of those questions is, does someone other than your parent or step-parent have legal guardianship of you as determined by a court in your state of legal residence? So if you are in a legal guardianship, so someone other than your parents or step-parents have guardianship of you, you would click this box and then you would not provide parent or guardian information on the FAFSA. Please keep in mind, if you are in a legal guardianship, you will need to eventually provide documentation of that to the financial aid office at the college you're attending. But if you click that, then it's only going to ask for the student's information on the FAFSA. It'll also ask you if you're homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. If that applies to you, you would click yes, and then you won't have to provide any parent information on the FAFSA, but you will have to provide the college with documentation of that. Typically, what the financial aid office is looking for is something from your high school guidance counselor confirming that status, maybe a copy of the McKinney-Vento recommendation, but just keep in mind you would have to provide the college with documentation of that. But otherwise, if you say no to all of the dependency status questions on the FAFSA, it's going to ask for your parents' information. When it's asking for parent information, they have a section on the FAFSA where they help you figure that out. Who's my parent when filling out the FAFSA? So definitely pay close attention to that. The question we're receiving right now for students who are completing the 22-23 FAFSA is, if my parents are divorced, whose information do I include? The way it currently works, so this is the way it works for the 22-23 FAFSA, and this may change for the 23-24 FAFSA. So for this year, this applies, but check with the college for the 23-24 year to see if this has changed. But the way it works currently is, if the parents are divorced, you include the income information of the parent you've lived with the most during the past 12 months. And if that parent has remarried, you must also include the step parent's information. When it gets to the parent financial section of the FAFSA, if it gives your parents the option to click on proceed to the IRS, so Irs Data Retrieval tool, they are going to want to click that button because it's going to make completing the FAFSA so much easier. In order to link to the IRS, your parent will have to have their FSA ID set up, and it'll ask for the FSA ID. It'll then take them to the IRS website, and it'll pull in a lot of information from the parent's FSA ID, but what it won't pull in is the address. So it's going to want to find out what the address was exactly as it appeared on the parent's tax return. So it really wants exactly, even if there's a typo in the tax return, type in that typo because it has to match exactly the address that appeared on the tax return. And then if it finds the parent's income, it's going to say, look, we're going to transfer all of these numbers into the FAFSA for you, the adjusted gross income, the income earned from work, all of this stuff. So instead of you having to type in all these numbers, we're just going to transfer all of that in for you. You have to click this little small gray box to then have the transfer now box ungray so you can click it, and then it'll transfer that information into the FAFSA for you. It'll also ask income questions of the student. So once you've answered the parent financial questions, some students get confused and they'll say, hey, I just answered these. You answered them for the parents. It's going to ask the student those same questions. So keep in mind, eventually it'll ask, hey, student, did you work during 2020? If so, did you file a tax return? So keep in mind, it will eventually ask for the student's financials. Then when you get to the very end, it's going to show you a summary of what you input, so that way you can make sure everything looks correct. You will then get to click the continue button, so that way you can sign and submit your FAFSA. Before you can sign and submit your FAFSA, you have to agree to the terms, which basically those say you're going to use these funds to help pay for the cost of attending college. It'll then show that you, the student, signed the FAFSA. And if it needs a parent signature, it's going to ask for that parent signature. And the parent would sign it with the parent's FSA ID, unless the parent is not able to set up an FSA ID because they don't have a social security number. In that case, there's other options to sign and submit. That's when you would print out that signature page, have the parent sign it, and mail it off. But then once it's signed and submitted, you'll then get a confirmation page, and it'll say your FAFSA was successfully submitted to federal student aid. And it'll also give you a very important number. That number is called the Estimated Expected Family Contribution, or EFC. This figure is not what you pay to the college. It's also not how much aid you will receive. Basically, what we do is we use this figure to determine your eligibility for federal student aid. So we use it to determine, do you qualify for grants, which are free money? If not, do you qualify for a need-based loan that doesn't accrue interest while you're in school? If not, do you just qualify for a non-need-based loan from the federal government that will be accruing interest while you're in school? So that is how that number is used. And every college gets this number that you put on your FAFSA. So when the colleges get this number, they take their cost of attendance figure, subtract that number from it to determine your need. And then we try to award aid to meet your need if we can, but sometimes we can and sometimes we can't due to federal, state, and school aid limits. When it comes to cost of attendance, it's important to keep in mind that a college is required to provide you with an estimate of all the costs associated with going to college. Those include direct costs, so costs you're paying directly to the school, and indirect costs, costs you may incur but are not paid directly to the school. So this is when I'm going to use UGA as an example. For our incoming first-year students, we require that they live on campus unless you live in Clark County or one of the 5 contiguous counties that are around Clark County. But otherwise, you're required to live on campus. And so if the student's a first-year student and they are living on campus, then their direct costs would be tuition, student fees, and then we list here the average cost of the residence hall. And then if a student signs up for the meal plan, this is the cost of the meal plan. The indirect costs include books and supplies. So you're not paying for your books through your UGA student account. They're purchased through a bookstore or a website. Transportation is basically things for like gas for the car. So that's not anything you're paying to UGA. And then living expenses is basically spending money. So that's not anything you're paying to UGA. If you are a Clark County student and you are able to exempt out of living in the residence hall, then your direct costs may just be tuition and fees to UGA. So if you're going to attend UGA or another college, check with the college to find out what is the estimated cost of attendance and what are those direct costs that I have to pay directly to the school, and what are the indirect costs that I can kind of worry about as I go along, such as gas for the car and living expenses. What is federal student aid? So we've talked about how to apply, but what is federal aid? So there's different kinds. There are actually 2 kinds of grants, the Pell Grant and the Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. Those are free money. There's work study to part-time job, and then there's also the ability to borrow money. Students can borrow a loan and parents can borrow a loan. This grant, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant and work study, those are both very limited. So that's why it's important you complete your FAFSA early, so that way if you do qualify for these funds, you have a better chance of getting them if your FAFSA has been completed early. And grants, to qualify for grants, your EFC from your FAFSA currently has to be 5846 or less. So it could be anywhere from 0 to that 5846. And if you qualify for Pell, it could be a small amount, about $672 for the year, or a large amount, almost $6,500 or somewhere in between. But if you qualify for grants, that's free money. You don't have to pay it back. Work study is a part-time job. So keep in mind, work study does not get applied towards your tuition and fees, your housing, your meal plan, but it gives you the ability to work and earn funds to help pay for those living expenses. And then you can also borrow student loans. The great thing about federal student loans is that typically the interest rate is very low in comparison to, say, a private student loan. Currently, it's only 3.73% fixed, so that's a low rate. So if you need to borrow a loan, we encourage you to use the federal loans due to that low fixed rate, as opposed to a variable rate with a private loan. With a private student loans, they typically have variable rates that go up and down, whereas the federal loans are locked in at a fixed low rate. I do also want to talk about state aid, so the Hope and the Zell Miller scholarships. Although the FAFSA screened you for Hope and Zell, we encourage students to also apply through GA Futures by completing something called the GSF apps. If you apply through GA Futures, you apply one time, and this application is just for Hope and Zell, and then you don't have to worry about applying again because the application remains valid for up to 10 years. So let's say 1 year down the road when you're in college, you have a delay in completing your FAFSA, at least your state aid will roll into that year as long as you've maintained your eligibility, if you also have this application on file. So it's a nice backup application for your HOPE and Zell. To qualify for HOPE out of high school, you have to have a 3.0 in your core classes in high school, and you had to have passed at least 4 rigorous courses while in high school. So that's AP classes and core subjects, dual enrollment classes and core subjects, and international baccalaureate classes and core subjects. Then once you're in college, you have to maintain a 3.0 college HOPE GPA, and HOPE pays a portion of tuition at a per credit hour rate at a public college in Georgia. So it doesn't cover all of the tuition, it covers a part of it. There is also the Zell Miller Scholarship. You can either receive HOPE or Zell. You can't receive both at the same time. It's a little bit more challenging to qualify for Zell. You have to have a 3.7 in your core classes in high school, and you had to have passed at least 4 rigorous courses while in high school. And you had to have made a 1200 on the SAT in the critical reading and math, or a 26 on the ACT, and 1 test sitting by high school graduation. Or if you're valedictorian or salutatorian, you can qualify for Zell without the 3.7 in the test scores, but you still had to at least be HOPE eligible. And if you do not qualify for Zell out of high school, there's not an opportunity to gain it while in college. You have to initially qualify out of high school. Once you're in college, you have to maintain a 3.3, and Zell pays 100% of the standard rate of tuition at a public college in Georgia. So HOPE a portion of tuition, Zell 100% of the standard rate of tuition at a public college in Georgia. If you do attend a private college in the state of Georgia, you can still get HOPE and Zell. It pays just a lump sum amount, and I'm displaying those amounts here on the screen. So you can still get it, but it just pays a lump sum amount. And then how long does HOPE or Zell last? So whichever of the following occurs first is when HOPE or Zell will end. Once you've accumulated 127 attempted hours while in college, earned a bachelor's degree, or 10 years after high school graduation for students who received their first HOPE or Zell payment summer 2019 or later. So whichever of these occurs first is when HOPE or Zell will end. And that 127 includes everything since high school. So once you start college, that's when your 127 starts accumulating. So if you withdraw from a class while you're in college, that counts towards your 127. If you repeat a course, that counts towards your 127. If you decide to go out of state initially to college and then transfer back to the state of Georgia to finish out college, even though HOPE and Zell did not pay for those hours, they still count towards your 127 because it's everything since high school graduation. But it does not include your AP credit, your IB credit, or your dual enrollment hours. Those do not eat into your 127. And the average degree takes about 121 hours to get that degree. So HOPE Scholarship and Zell Miller Scholarship are for students who are going to colleges to pursue as an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. If you're going to a technical school such as Athens Tech or Georgia Gwinnett Technical College and getting a certificate or diploma, then you move into the grant. So HOPE Grant, Zell Miller Grant. So with HOPE Grant, that is for students who are pursuing a certificate or diploma at a technical school. It pays a portion of tuition. You don't have to have a certain GPA out of high school to get HOPE Grant. You just have to be enrolled in a HOPE Grant eligible program. And you're checked for at least a 2.0 GPA at certain checkpoints. There is also the Zell Miller Grant. So that is again for students who are pursuing a certificate or diploma at a technical school. The way this one works is you initially get the HOPE Grant. Then if at the end of the semester you have a 3.5 or higher cumulative GPA, they will reimburse you for what HOPE Grant did not pay that first semester, and then they'll pay the full amount of your tuition for that second semester. And then at the end of that second semester, they'll check and see, do you have the 3.5? If you don't, you'll go back down to the HOPE Grant, and then you have an opportunity to get it back if you do go back up to the 3.5. If you're going to pursue a certificate or diploma, there's also the HOPE Career Grant, where if you're pursuing a certificate or diploma in jobs where we need more workers than we have to fill them, then you can get funds on top of your HOPE Grant or your Zell Miller Grant. The amounts range from $125 to $500 depending upon the program. These are a few examples here. They have over 100 programs that qualify for the career grant, but these are some examples. Practical nursing, you can see film production, lighting technician is on there. Georgia's becoming a hub for filmmaking, so we need those workers. Supply chain management, basic electrician. So if you are going to go to a technical school and get a certificate or diploma, check and see if the program you're applying to also qualifies for the HOPE career grant. And then I know that was a lot of information packed into 30 minutes, but if you have additional questions, you can email our office. We have an email address at osfa@uga.edu. You can give us a call at 706-542-6147. We're open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. Or you can ask me a question now if you have a question now.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Mandy. I learned so much myself, even though I have gone through this process. But I do have a question that I want to kick us off with. So what is the most common mistake that you've seen students make in this process? And what advice do you have to kind of mitigate that?
The most common mistake I see is that a student will complete the FAFSA and they'll complete it in a timely manner, but then their FAFSA will get selected for that verification process. And then the students will not follow up on that process until closer to the start of classes, and that'll cause them to miss out on those limited funds. We communicate with students about this verification process through email. So if a student is admitted to UGA, that's when we start processing their FAFSA information. And if they don't have a UGA email, we send the email to whatever email they input on their FAFSA. But as soon as they have a UGA email, we start communicating with that email. And sometimes students, because they are used to different technologies, so text messaging, things like that, they're not as prone to check their email frequently and may miss out on emails and then be slow to respond and then get that documentation into us, well past that December 15th date and then miss out on funds. So students, I know email is an antiquated form of communication now. People are used to things like text messaging or social media and all of that, but colleges still use email to communicate. So check your email and respond to requests for information as quickly as you can. If you get an email, you're not sure that it's legitimate, you can always call the college's financial aid office and we can help you figure that out. But if you get a request for information from a college, then follow up on that quickly and you will get those requests typically through email. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Mandy, I just want to thank you to echo May. It was just such a comprehensive presentation, and I know that it'll be such a great resource for students. And I'm glad we recorded it because I know that FAFSA can kind of be this black box for students, and I think you did a great job of making it really simple and easy to understand in that sense. So we appreciate you being here.
Wonderful, very good. Glad to hear that. And again, if students need help with the FAFSA, they should never pay anyone. And I do schedule FAFSA appointments with students. I can do it through Zoom where the student shares their screen and I just watch them complete it, or I can set up in-person ones. So if you need help with the FAFSA, definitely reach out to me or the college you're going to, or to your high school guidance counselor to find out when their FAFSA nights are and get assistance, but never ever pay anyone for assistance with completing the FAFSA.
Got it.
Yeah, thank you for that golden piece of knowledge. So everyone take a screenshot, take some pictures. I would honestly have loved to take advantage of that rather than like yelling back and forth between my parents to do this. So yeah, I really recommend.
Awesome. Well, I'll stop the recording here. And then once again, we'll have a little bit of a break. Our next speaker won't be until 4:30. So we've got some time to get a snack, maybe go for a walk and come back for our final speaker of the day. But Mandy, once again, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
No problem. Glad to help. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you. Bye.